Joshi. Yeah. So, friends, welcome to this session, The Fine Art of Christian Parenting. This idea actually for this session came from Brother Prabhu, who himself is a very dedicated parent, who's actually even taking a break to spend time with his children, from his professional life. So, I would like to request Brother Prabhu to say a few words as to how and why he thought about this topic, and then we could turn to a speaker, Dr. Jamila. Yeah, Brother Prabhu, are you there? Yeah, can you
Yes,
go?
Pastor Abhijit.
Yeah,
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for
yeah.
enabling this platform for all of us to come together and discuss.
Can you put your
Just
video on? Video.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for enabling this platform for every one of us to convene together. We actually, Brother Abhijit has done a tremendous job because it's less than 1 week back that I spoke to him about this idea. And the background to that is I am the parent of two kids who are 11 and 14. And until now, um, I've had I am very involved in their lives, but then as you know, till the age of 10 or more, pretty much all Christian parents have a lot of resources to keep their kids engaged. They are very active in Sunday school. There are a lot of books for to engage their minds spiritually, but uh, there is a big vacuum from the ages of 10 to 17 because generally Christian ministries, when they target kids and youth, they either target the very small kids or they target the youth from the ages of 17 onwards in terms of college fellowships and all that. But that age from 11 to 17, say roughly give or take a few years, is there's a massive vacuum here because that is where the personality of the child develops. You can't really call the child a proper adolescent, a proper teenager, and you cannot call the child as a small child as well. So that's where they really need to self start. And I found I found myself very challenged when I looked at my interaction with my kids. And I also had the opportunity to teach at my kids' school for about 2 months last year. And this is middle school. I was teaching middle school, which is the same age that my kids belong to. And I found that even though I was a very involved parent, attending every parent teacher meeting, I found that the impression I had about the school and its environment is very different as a teacher compared to a parent. Because as a parent, I just hear a few good things for about 10 minutes with the teacher and I walk off. But as a teacher, I see each and every student in my child's class. I see where they come from, how they behave, what are their motivations. Uh, I can see the peer group of my children in an entirely different light. And that's when I realized that we have a very enormous responsibility and parenting is not what it used to be those days. And then those years 11 to 14 goes by very quickly. And pretty soon their parents the children are having their board exams, and that is where the parents get involved. So I had this conversation with Pastor Avijit, and then we thought of having a session, and then he said Dr. Jamila is the right person because she's got years of experience dealing with this age group. So that's where it all started. So that's a bit of background. Thank you, Pastor Abhijit.
Thank you, Brother Prabhu. Yeah, so now, as usual, what we do is the speaker will speak for a length of time, and then we will have Q&A after that. So, Dr. Jamila Koshy needs no introduction for those of us who have been joining, but for the sake of the few who may be joining for the first time, I'd like to introduce her. Dr. Jamila Koshy is a psychiatrist by practice. She graduated from the Armed Forces Medical College, Pune, and completed her postgraduate studies in psychological medicine from the University of Bombay. She has served in the Indian Army. Dr. Jamila has contributed to many books and journals too. The books Side by Side, Talking Families, Should I Care, uh, Theology Exploring Expressions, Public Theology Exploring Expression of the Christian Faith are part of the initiative in book writing on issues of contemporary concern that she's been involved with. So, over to Dr. Jamila to lead us in this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Jamila. Over to you. Welcome. You're on mute, I think.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
was saying thank you, Pastor Abhijit, for that very nice introduction. I think I should change the introduction for you. And thank you, Prabhu, for initiating this. And let's get right to it. So, healthy Christian parenting, that was what I was asked today. And yes, actually, those were good words because it stresses that it's about parenting, healthy Christian parenting, requiring, in a sense, healthy Christians, okay, requiring healthy, mature Christians. And in fact, it's good that we keep the focus on parents because, in a sense, that is the factor which we can most easily change, and also the factor that often requires the most change. Okay. For instance, one of the commonest problems that parents come with to the hospital, to a psychologist, psychiatrists, pediatricians, is the complaint that the child is not eating, right? But the thing is that in at least 90% of the cases, the child will be fairly active, the child will be well, the child is definitely not malnourished. Okay. But it's the parents who are probably either underestimating what they're feeding the child or overestimating what the child should eat, or they are over worried about the whole issue. So it's often a parental issue here. So in a sense, it is good because it is more easily controllable if it is a parental issue, right? In any case, it is a area that we all are concerned about, right? Parenting. And it's an area which we're all going to make mistakes. Okay. So let me say that right from the start. We all will make mistakes in this, and our hope and our expectation is that the Lord will overlook and overrule the mistakes that we make in order to help our children to grow into His likeness. And that's the comfort and the confidence that we have because of our faith. All right. So all parents want their kids to grow up to, I ask this question sometimes in an interactive session where it's possible when you're seeing people face to face, like, what do you want from your children? And often they will say things like do well in studies and all that, but finally it boils down to this, that you want a kid who is a good Christian, who's following God, who's loving, who's kind, who's doing as well as they possibly can. So ultimately, this is what all parents want. In fact, it sort of harks back to the way Jesus was described, right, as a child, that Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and men. And that is the nicest wish and hope that we can have for our children. So yes, but the question is how, right? The question is, how do we do this? What do we do to facilitate our children turning into this kind of, a mature Christian young person, very stable and, giving, loving, kind, this sort of thing? How do we facilitate this kind of stable Christian identity? This whole issue. How do we do it? What do we do? What's our part in it? Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of psychological background to this. I hope I won't bore you. I'll try to keep it short and brief, but I think that when we understand the psychological part of it, we can get our own answers as to how this should be done. Okay, so psychology has contributed and helped us a great deal in understanding this. So let's use this. It's a useful thing to know. Okay, so some of the terms that we're going to use are things like identity, right? We're talking about that. How do we form a stable identity? Self-esteem, okay, so what you think about yourself, how you value yourself, self-efficacy, how competent you see yourself, and self-image, all right? So let's start with self-image, and we'll sort of bring in all these words. They're all pretty closely linked, and we will see how we as parents can contribute to establishing this kind of stable identity of a child with a good self-esteem and good self-image focused on Christ. Okay, this is our goal. All right. So what is self-image, right? Now, self-image is a mental picture that kids, adults too, have of themselves. All right. Now it contributes to one's identity, but it's not exactly the same. A self-image can be positive or it can be negative. And if you have a positive self-image of yourself, that is, if the picture you have in your mind of yourself is a positive one, you usually end up with good and high self-esteem. If the picture is negative, you end up with low self-esteem. All right. So these are the sort of things that even children think, isn't it? It's hitting them earlier and earlier, the whole thing about being fat. All right. So particularly girls will complain of this, that I'm too fat, I'm putting on weight, or some will think they're too thin, or some will have a happy idea that I'm cool. Okay. So facial features or hair or what to do with your clothes, all these sort of things bother kids. All right. And it's not just looks. Sometimes it's also intelligence. So sometimes children worry that they're dumb. Sometimes children worry that they're a disappointment to their family, or that they're useless, they're a failure. These kind of contributions to self-image, negative self-image, can be very destructive. All right. So now what we need to look at is, where does this self-image come from? How is it built in the child's mind? Now, there are 4 main sources from the external world, not from inside the child, but from outside, which contribute to creating this self-image. And this is something that we need to understand so that we can help the child to have a positive self-image. So one's body contributes. Okay, parents contribute, that's mom and dad. Our achievements contribute. And then, of course, the world.
What happened here?
Social media, all these things will contribute to how the child creates the self-image in their mind. Now, unfortunately, the self-image created by these things is pretty fragile. All right. It's like a wine glass which will crack if you drop it down. It creates lots of problems. Those were the 4 things we mentioned, right? One's body, one's parents, one's achievements, and the world around. And you can see that all of them can have major, major problems. Dad and mom make mistakes. They say things. We all have said things. No, you're useless. You will never do anything in life. You will end up as a peon. Okay. People say these kind of things. Our bodies are what we don't like. Our achievements fluctuate. They cannot be predicted. And the world, its standards are crazy. And this is the kind of input that our children are getting from outside as to what they should think about themselves. So you can imagine the kind of problems that they have, right? So basing your self-esteem on this doesn't make any sense. But we have done it as adults, and the children do it as children. Let's think about the sort of problems that are caused, right? Suppose a child is basing their self-image basically on their body. Just think about the kind of things that can happen, right? You can be obsessed with external beauty, with clothes. Children want to buy this or that. They're obsessed with hair, what to do with your skin. They're obsessed with figures. It's not just girls, mind you. Boys are equally interested in developing, their muscles or six-pack or whatever it is. They worry about their skin, pimples, okay, height, weight, your nose. And you can end up spending a lot of money on all this. They demand maybe new gels, shampoos, straightening your hair, okay, maybe gymming. So not just yourself, you start judging others on beauty too. So this kind of fixation with one's body, believe me, a lot of adults have it too, isn't it? And we can pass it on to our kids. Achievements. Now, the problem with achievements is it's something which is so much stressed in school all the time. And it's so much stressed by parents all the time that people start judging themselves by their achievements or lack of them. And they're constantly trying to achieve more and more. So the whole thing is about who got most marks. The whole thing is about, did you get into this, whatever particular class, or this particular hobby class, or this particular college, or this particular, whatever it is. It's all about achievement. And you are crushed if you don't get that particular achievement. And if you get it, you end up being proud, and you judge people also on this, and life becomes a competition. The whole of life becomes one rat race. Okay? And this is something children start basing their self-esteem on. You can imagine how dangerous this is. When I made this the first time, these were some of the ads which used to come with. We don't see TV ads much anymore, so I didn't have anything new to put. I didn't want to. But I think that the ads are still the same. It's always playing on our need to be in front, right? Onida TV had that ad, neighbors envy, owners pride. Okay. And Surf, the powder, detergent powder, bhala uski sari, mere sari se safed kaise. Okay, so these were the kind of things. It's all about competing. It's all about wanting to be first. It's all about beating out the other person. And this is the kind of self-image that the world is proclaiming and our children are exposed to. Now, parents themselves, they can affect their child's self-image and self-esteem by the things they say, by the things they expect, by the things they praise, by the things people they compare their children to, by the values that they are displaying in front of their children, okay? By the way they talk to each other. We reveal ourselves to our children, and our children are watching, and they're constantly then trying to live up to their parents' expectation, and sad if they cannot, perhaps angry if they cannot, all right? Sometimes they rebel, they don't want to follow those things because they are angry. And sometimes the sense of failure can follow the child into adulthood. And this is the kind of self-image the child has, that I am a failure. I have not lived up to my parents' expectation or whatever it is. Peers. Now, peers have their own sense of values, right? Not just children, also the greater peer circle that they have on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, all right, YouTube, all these things. And the children are seeing all this and they want to do whatever gets them accepted into the cool gang. And this is something very real. And their dream is to be what the world tells them is good. It may be about earning money. It may be about going to a particular college. It may be about being pretty or being dressed like your favorite film star. It may be about studying in the US or Canada or wherever it is. These kind of things become the child's wish. And I remember when I was in Chennai, it was a total craze among the kids there. They would not brook their parents saying no to this. They all wanted to go and study abroad. Parents had to go and beg, borrow, steal money sometimes to send the children abroad, because this was the peer pressure and the world's expectation, the kind of image that the child made of themselves. This is what I want. Sometimes it ends up with them having two lives, no? One at home and one in front of their friends. Two different kind of personas. Okay. So given all this, that there are these 4 areas of external factors which affect how children will have their self-image, how they form their identity, what is a parent to do? I think the important thing is that we need to first realize this, that these things are affecting our children. And we need to, let's start with mom and dad first, okay? The one at the upper right corner. We have to role model a Christian view of how each child is. And what is that? Each of these could be a whole Bible study, right? What is God's opinion of each person? And we don't really need to go very far. Genesis 1 is enough, no? It tells us that God has made every human being in his image, that they are precious in his sight. They bear the stamp of God's work in them. They are image bearers of God. They are given an awesome responsibility of being steward of the world. This is God's view of everybody. So it should be our view of our child. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter how well they do. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. It doesn't matter, how intelligent they are. None of those things matters. Each child is precious. Do we live that out every day? Do we role model that? In the way we talk about other children, in the way we talk about our cousins, in the way we talk about the latest wedding that we go to. Do we evaluate people on their looks and money and status and style and all that? This is what the parents' role is. Can you imagine how tremendous it is if the children see us consistently showing that God loves each person, that each person is valuable, no matter what they look like, no matter what they do, no matter, how rich or poor or whatever they are. Just imagine the difference it would make. What about the Christian view of the body? What does God say about the body? God says that he has created each body, right? Each person, no matter how tall, how short, how, whatever the skin complexion, whatever the sometimes handicap that the person has, whatever it is, that God has made each person and they are special just the way they are. And while we can try to make ourselves a little fitter or healthier or whatever, we do not need to despise ourselves for anything, because God himself says that Jesus was, he did not have any physical attraction that we should look at him, right? That's what he says. And then God says that God does not look at the externals. He looks at the heart. Don't look at how tall he is. Don't look at how handsome he is. That is what God told Samuel when Samuel was going to anoint the king of Israel. He says, look at the heart. That's where I look. And do we consistently role model and speak this out to our children? Is this how we evaluate? Is this how we live our lives? And believe me, the children are watching. And I've said role model in each case because our actions, it's our parenting, it's our authenticity in living this out, which will influence our children. What do we really think about achievements? Do we realize that our achievements are God's grace? If we manage to get the top rank in class or whatever it is, it's because God has given you intelligence. It's because you had circumstances which made it possible for you to study. It's not your, it's not something, it's not your credit alone. It's not something to brag or boast about. It's something with which to serve other people. So our achievements are not to be taken in a spirit of competition and one-upmanship on others. It's just as, okay, this is just an evaluation which was done, and we use it to get into a place where we can serve better. That's all. You get it into a place where your gifts and talents can be used. And achievements are useful for this. But otherwise, we should not brag and boast about achievements or anything like that, because it really doesn't matter. In the long term, it's not going to count, right? Does it matter if you scored 98 or 97 and the guy who scored 95 should feel bad that they scored only 95? All these are foolish things, right? And how are we going to communicate this to our children unless we live it out? And one of the first things that we need to do there is by never, ever asking how much someone else in the child's class got. Never, ever ask, what was your rank in class? How does it matter? That's not what is important, right? What is important is whether your child enjoyed the study, whether your child learned something, whether your child learned to love and enjoy studying. These are the things that you should talk about, right? In fact, I'd like to read to you. I wonder if I have that here. Yeah, I'd like to read to you a quote from Francis Collins. Okay, he is the guy who headed the Genome Project. He is a Christian, and he said, in his video on my journey from atheism to Christianity, he said that he was raised on a dirt farm, and then so his mom taught him at home, right, till the 6th standard, which was unconventional in the 1950s. His mother also wrote plays, and they founded a theater at home. So I got raised in this wonderful mix of ideas of music, of theater, and the arts, all right? But what his mother taught him, he says he remembers, she taught me to love the experience of learning new things. Now, this is from the man who has gone ahead to head the Genome Project. Okay, obviously a very brilliant, gifted, academically very good guy. But he was brought up in this atmosphere of loving multiple things and enjoying different things. And his mother taught him the experience of loving to learn new things, learn to love new achievements. This is what was taught to him, not the fact that you beat somebody else or are better than someone else, came first in class. These are all petty things. Okay, so a Christian view of this is to deal with it a little differently. Okay, what about a Christian view of friends, society, social media? How do we as parents role model this to our children? Now, if we are going to say that we need to spend time with friends, we need to spend time with family, we need to integrate well with society, we need to role model this to our children, that we work with family, we forgive family when they say something mean to us. Okay, we get involved anyway, we help our grandparents, we support the person who's not able to go themselves to the hospital, whatever. If there's somebody who's poor in the family, we all chip in to help. This is the kind of thing that we need to role model to our children. What about social media, right? Do we demonstrate to our children we ourselves control our phone usage? Do we demonstrate that we have our limits, that we want to spend time with the family, that we do not sit on our phones all the time. So do we role model and show how we balance out, living in society and contributing and interacting and forgiving and being humble and all the rest of it? Do we role model and speak this out to our children? This is a huge thing. Remember that this is not a small thing. And I'm going on about this for a long time because this is one of the most important slides in my show. That look, this is countercultural. You as parents, as you teach your young children, you need to speak this out to them. These are radical teachings. It is not going to be heard anywhere else. They're not going to necessarily teach this in school. They might not even teach it very much in church. They may, but they may not. They may not teach it very much in, their friend circle. But you are the most important and influential person in your child's life. You and your spouse need to speak this to the children. It needs to be part of the family ethos, that this is how we live, that we are interested in society. We are interested in justice. We are interested in issues of equality. Okay, we are interested in the poor. We are interested in doing things to help NGOs or whatever. Okay, we are interested in good politics. When you show all this, that this is how we live, this is how a Christian worldview is, our children will learn and they'll pick up a good and happy and healthy self-esteem and identity. Okay. So rather than going for those external things, psychologists say that a better way for a child to get a good self-image is to have these internal understandings, okay? Thinking that they have value, thinking that they accept themselves, being confident of their views, okay? Taking responsibility for their life, committing themselves to living ethically, and having meaningful goals, as I said, that will include justice, goodness, equality, helping, service. These are meaningful goals, not the latest, not acquiring the latest car, or, those are not really long-lasting, meaningful goals. Accepting difficulties realistically, being able to cope with life's challenges. These are the, the internal factors which will lead to a child having great self-esteem. Now, the issue is, how do we inculcate this in our children? And I will come to that, okay? But we can understand how to do this by looking at the factors which then influence. From self-image, we will move to identity development, okay, which is linked, as I said. But as a child forms their self-image and identity, there are different factors which influence, right? There are the biosocial factors, okay? And there are the psychodynamic factors. There's just two ways of looking at it. And I'm going to just look at it and explain it to you briefly as to what is this whole idea of identity. I won't spend much time on this, okay? It's just a combination of your physical, psychological, behavioral, and social characteristics. And right now I need to say your identity could even be legal, and digital identity is also important. So this is another way of looking at it. It encompasses your whole presentation of yourself, your memories, your experiences, your relationships. All this combines to form the identity of a person. But still, this is only half the story, okay? This is another definition. An individual's unique traits and characteristics, family dynamics, cultural, ethnic norms, beliefs, experiences, all this combines to make the child or the adult what they are, their identity, whatever they possess. But again, there's something left out. And that is this, that you have to, all this combines to create a sense of self that integrates one's inner self, person's social world. Okay, so basically we're talking about one's social identity. Your identity is formed not just by your own personal understanding of yourself, but as to what you are in the world. Okay, you are part of a society. You are part of a family. You are part of a community. And it's in relationship to others that you understand yourself. So for instance, I don't just say I am this person. I say, right, that I am an Indian. I am a Christian. I belong to this community. I have these friends. I have this intellectual community, or hobbies community, or church community. This is the kind of identity that we form for ourselves. Okay, now this is actually very much in keeping with scripture, because if you look at scripture in Genesis 1, what does it say? That God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he them. Male and female created he them, right? So he created them as individuals, man and woman, but he also created them together, and they are reflecting God's image, individually, and also together they are stewards of the world. So there is a sense of individualism and there is a sense of community. So this goes hand in hand, okay? And we cannot deny these two. Now, it's important what I'm saying, because when we're talking about our children also, we need to remember this, that they have their personal identity, but equally they have a social identity, which we need to understand and foster. And we need to help them to grow, and we'll come to how we're going to do that. So the image bearers were to live together, relate together, to live before God and live for each other, to create society and to hand down the teaching to their children. All these things are what the couple were to do, right? Now, similarly, in the New Testament, if you look at 1 Corinthians 12, I'll just read a few verses to you. This is another example of where there is individualism as well as community, okay? 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12, it says, the body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts. And though all its parts are many, they form one body. So it is with Christ. Verse 13, for we were all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink, right? Verse 21, the eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you, saying that we are interdependent, right? And then verse 25, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers. If one part is honored, every part rejoices. Now, you are the body of Christ. Each one of you is a part of it. So we are, individuals. We are people saved individually by God, right? That is completely true. We make our personal decision to follow Christ, and we will be praying for our children to follow Christ. But we are at the same time members of Christ's body, the church. And it is in this community that Christ is revealed, right? He's revealed in each person as well, but he's revealed also in the community, that you are together the temple of God, right? So this is in keeping with scripture, the whole sense of personal and social relational identity. Okay, so biosocially, these are all the various things that people have to look at. Okay, there's biology. Now remember, biology is also very important in your identity. Your height, your weight, your hair color, any particular body issues that you have, all this is biology. And Christian parents can do very little. We can't really control that very much, right? We have very little control over that. Now, the home experience, when you talk about it from a sociological angle, the home experiences will influence a child's self-image and identity. And this the parents can control to a large extent. We'll go to that later. The school experience. Prabhu shared that, didn't he? That the school experience, when you look at it from a teacher and from a parent's point of view, it's completely different. And there are lots and lots of issues. It's not always the parents can control much of what goes on at school, but we can help our children to process it, and we can help them to deal with it. Okay, and we'll come to that again a little later. What about the extended family? I said that we have an identity in the family, in our community. Can we control that? Yeah, to a certain extent, not completely. Older people, you can't really control, grandparents and all too much, right? You can't really control how people behave and all that, not too much, but you can control a little bit. Okay, control the contact, control how the contact happens, all that thing. There's some control is there. What about virtual society? As we said, the social media and the social virtual world that we inhabit, all of us these days. Then we can again help child to control and process the inputs that they are getting. Larger society, again, we can help the child to process. We can introduce them to good people, to good role models, to understand, to learn the nuances, to learn the follies of each community, and to learn to process and deal with it. Okay, let's come quickly to the psychodynamic understanding. Okay, now in the psychodynamic understanding, the whole thing is that this is an unconscious process, often related to childhood experiences. Now, this is a good theory which a guy called Erickson came out with, but how personality is developed in a stepwise fashion. Okay, and you can see this step going up from this all the way here. Now, the age group that we are concerned about is this area, the blue and the green. All right, so maybe from around 8 to 10 till around 12, then 12 to around 16 to 18. In this period, the child's task is to develop a sense of industry. All right. If he doesn't develop a sense of industry, the child ends up feeling inferior. In this stage, the stage of teenage, early, middle to late teenage, the child's task is to develop a sense of identity. If you don't develop that, the child ends up in dual confusion. All right. So these are building on what has come earlier. The earlier stages have taught the child trust, have taught the child autonomy, and have taught the child initiative. Once they have learned these, they are ready to go to this next stage. And this is something which is important. If you have not trained the child properly from 0 to 8 years old, then there's going to be some problems which the child has, and you have to first cover up that backlog before you can expect the child to advance a little more. All right. So what do we do about stage 4? Let's go to stage 4 again. This is a stage from around, say, 8 to around 10 to 12, where the child has to learn industry. All right. How does a child learn industry, and why is it important? It's important because it helps the child to take responsibility for their life. It helps a child to learn to live, with ethics, to learn to live with authenticity, to learn to live with morals, right? Because you are learning that you have to work hard in order to achieve something. You're learning that I have to put in the effort and then I get some kind of reward. So when I do my sums properly, I have the sense of achievement. I've mastered this chapter. Okay. If I write a good essay, I know that I have learned how to, handle this English language, whatever it is. So I'm taking responsibility for my learning. I'm taking responsibility for the discipline of work. I'm learning to do things honestly with my own effort. That is ethically, no cheating, no, fudging, no cut and paste. I'm doing it on my own. I'm learning to have meaningful goals to master this or that, whatever it is. And I'm learning also to accept sometimes difficulties and setbacks. I may not do well sometimes. I may struggle with something sometimes. I may have to put in extra effort. I may have to say sorry. I may have to ask for help. I'm learning to accept all this. So when the child learns this, there's huge learning which happens. Okay. And the child's self-image will depend on whether they have learned this. If they have not learned it at this stage, they will always end up with a sense of inferiority because they don't know how to work hard and perform and get things, get the outcome of their hard work. Now, what are the obstacles to this? The biggest obstacle is parents not allowing the child to learn on their own. This is actually the biggest obstacle that we see because parents want shortcuts sometimes for the child to do well in their studies. So they will sit and make the child, maybe mug up this subject or sit and make the child sit and write 50 times, 50 times. The child may learn, but it will not be with a sense of responsibility. It won't be with a sense of joy. It will be done at the behest of the parents, for the parents, with a sense of reluctance and a sense of boredom and a sense of, despair almost. There's no interest left in studies. Whereas, you remember what Francis Collins said? His mother taught him to enjoy learning new things. So it was his joy and delight to learn because that is the attitude which she had there, right? Now, it's not only studies, it's also other things. You can see this little child cleaning and this little child putting things away. So learning the industry of household chores and taking part in the family and contributing to help looking after the grandparents, all these kind of things are part of the industry that we need to be teaching the child at this age. Okay, I need to rush a bit. All right, next stage is identity, which as I said, it's early to mid to late teens, right? At this stage, the child is learning to firm up one's ego, okay? Building again on what they have learned in the past, the child now learns that I am going to decide what I'm going to be in life. I'm going to decide where my career is going to go. I'm going to decide what I'm going to believe. I'm going to decide who I hang out with. I'm going to decide what I wear, the whole process of how I present myself, what I think of myself is going to be formed at this stage. This happens by a process of exploration and commitment. And this picture will show how that happens. The x-axis, this axis, okay, this shows the whole process of exploration, and this exploration and this process shows commitment, okay? So exploration is on this and commitment is on this. I think it's given wrong. So there are 4 four sections which happen depending on how much of exploration and how much of commitment is manifested by the child. Identity achievement is when the child thinks about things, they have explored it, and then they have formed their identity. They say, I know now what I should do with my life. Foreclosure is when there hasn't been much exploration. Okay, so the exploration is low, but the commitment is high. So the child is saying, I've made a choice without thinking much about it, right? So this is the foreclosing of one's identity without much thought. Moratorium is where there is a lot of exploration, but no commitment. So the child is going on and on exploring. So I'm thinking about what I should do, but I haven't decided. And identity diffusion is where there is neither exploration nor is there commitment. So I don't know and I don't care what I'm supposed to do with my life. So there's this kind of confusion. Now you can think for yourself, which quadrant would you want your child in? Obviously in this one, isn't it? We'll be happiest if our child reaches this as soon as possible. Now, how does this happen? By questioning, pushing the boundaries, experimenting, and peer influence. All these things will happen together. And as a child goes through this, the parent's role is still vital. Remember that, okay? If you quash the questions, if you do not allow them to push the boundaries, if you frown on experimentation or you badmouth their peers and the peer influences, then their identity formation is going to be hindered, okay? So remember this, you need to allow them to question, to push the boundaries, experiment, maybe talk with friends and other people, whatever it is. And yes, it is difficult, okay? It's a difficult time, as as many of you would experience, as I experienced. It's not easy, and we need to be prepared. But however much you prepare, there is that emotional, thing which may happen, where you may be stunned suddenly to realize that your child has grown up and is questioning you, is questioning the Bible. Maybe they may say, how do I know the Bible is true? I don't want to follow this. I don't like what the church teaches on this. There'll be all sorts of things said. All right. Now you have to be prepared for this transition. You should not be reactive. Allow the child to go on talking. Keep the communication channels open. Remember that the transition is happening. They are moving from child to adult. All right. This is the transition period. You have to also move along with them. And this is a very important phase. We'll come to some more details about this. Okay. Right. The outcome finally is when these things happen. If the child has achieved that identity, along with those earlier things which happened when they, I take responsibility and all, remember I mentioned in the industry bit. But when you allow them to achieve identity, they end up thinking, I have some value. I accept myself and my family and my whatever, my maybe church background, my community, I accept them. And I have found my own reasonable views by which I live. It may not be exactly my parents' views, but I have these reasonable views by which I live. I take responsibility for this and I'm able to cope with life's challenges. Now, the thing is this is good, right? But then is this realistic? And is this something Christian? This is what people have asked me, that is this possible? I have value and all. How do we say all these things? Well, the fact is that this was given by secular psychologists. But as Christians, we have a Christian solution to this, right? That because of the presence of Christ with us, each of those 8 factors will have a slightly Christian tilt when we teach it to our children. What we want is for the child to end up thinking this, that I have value because God has valued me, right? Galatians 2:20, the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So if God values me enough to love me and die for me, I have great value. If the child thinks this, you can be sure that their identity in Christ is solid, okay? If the child accepts themselves, not that I'm a perfect person, but because I am a sinner who has repented and who's accepted by God, who is now a new creation, according to 2 Corinthians 5:17. So I can accept myself. Okay, I know I have all these problems. I know that, I am a sinner like others, but Christ has accepted me. Because of that, I have this new worldview. I have all these views which I can defend and live by. Okay, I can give a defense for whatever thoughts and plans and ideas that I have at any time, whenever I am asked for. And as I said, by the practice of taking responsibility for their studies, for their home, for interacting with people, They have learned that they should take responsibility for their life. And why? Because as Christian disciples, I have already given my life to Jesus. That's what Romans 12 says, isn't it? That I've presented my body as a living sacrifice. Therefore, I can take responsibility for what I'm doing because my life is anyway surrendered to God, and I have consciously and deliberately done that. I try to live ethically. Okay, ethics are very much a part of having a good self-image and self-identity in Christ because I want to please Him. This is what you want your child to learn. I have meaningful goals, no longer selfish. Whereas at one point, my goal perhaps was to be a champion sportsman. I wanted to study abroad, or I wanted to get this kind of job. I wanted to have this kind of money, or be this famous person. Now Colossians 3 tells me that I have set my heart and my mind on things above, where Christ is seated with God. That now my mind, my heart are set on God's concerns. Okay, you can read all these verses later for yourself. But the Christian worldview tells us this, that you can have meaningful goals. This is what we want to teach our children. I accept difficulties realistically. Okay, now Hebrews 12 and James 1 are both talking about the trials and temptations which come. And we will teach our children this and hope that our children will learn this from our worldview and our role modeling, that difficulties will come in life. And we have to be able to deal with them realistically and practically and without unnecessary whining, crying. I will do it. And I can cope with life's challenges because I have peace knowing that the Lord is with me and His grace is sufficient for me. Okay. And His power is made perfect in my weakness. When the child knows all this, they will have a great, solid self-esteem and Christian identity, which is not fragile. Will go on lasting forever and ever. Okay, so what can we do? Again, just some practical things to facilitate this. As I said, if there are any prior backlog, remember to teach the child that you're trustworthy. Remember to teach the child that you are, I just mentioned it here, prove yourself trustworthy to your child. Okay, don't treat your children differently. Don't be ever violent or verbally abusive to each other. Because how are you then trustworthy? The child should be able to trust fully that my parents I can rely on. If they say something, they do it. They are not whimsical. Their moods don't swing wildly. They don't lose control, right? They are kind. They work hard. I can always depend on their love for me and for others. And I know that they are humble and they will forgive me if I do something wrong. They will ask forgiveness if they do something wrong. You have to prove this kind of trustworthiness in yourself, and the child will learn, that the world is a trustworthy place. The child will learn how to trust. Okay. The second stage, which you missed perhaps, was allowing autonomy and allowing initiative. So we need in our homes to allow the child access to all sorts of interesting stuff. Again, Francis Collins, his home was full of interesting stuff. There was arts, there was music, there was conversation, there was, new learning of all kinds. All right. And this is what we need to introduce to our children. Introduce them to as many things as you can. All the interesting, beautiful stuff that God has created in this world, whether it's biology, okay, whether it's plants, whether it's animals, whether it's physics, whether it's chemistry, whether it's politics or economics or whatever, languages, okay, music, art. Expose the child to all sorts of interesting things in your home itself, okay? And because it is God's world, we are the caretakers of it. And that's the beautiful and wonderful experience that God is allowing us to have. And allow within this a lot of exploration and adventure in the child. Don't stifle the child. Let them explore. Let them do as much as they can. Allow them to make mistakes. Now, you need to teach them basic skills, right? But with a sense of fun. Teach them social skills. Teach them how to understand emotions in their siblings. Teach them how to understand emotions in you. Sometimes if you are feeling tired or, weary, you can say, I'm really feeling tired. And you would encourage by your example that when someone is tired, you help the other person. You bring them water, you offer them, a leg massage, or whatever it is. So you help them to understand and regulate emotion in themselves and in others. All right. And demonstrate constantly what a faith-filled life looks like. It's not just prayer and scriptures, remember, it's also personal goodness. It's also outreach to others. It's your open home. It's how you love other people. It's how you reach out to the poor. It's how you react to the beggar on the road. Okay. How do you demonstrate your faith-filled life to children at this age who are watching and learning from you? Okay. So this is something which you need to constantly work at. All right. What are the other things? Industry and identity. How does a parent help a child to develop industry? And that's on the left side. You help a child to develop industry by stepping back. Okay. In the early phase, when you have stepped back and you're given a child a chore to do, okay, you supervise, you offer help. You can say that, okay, this is how you do it. You outline the steps, and then you offer help, and then you step back and allow them to do it. As they learn the skill of doing it, whether it's homework, whether it's some household chore, give more and more over to the child so that it becomes the child's own. And as soon as possible, particularly in studies, you need to leave the child to do it on their own. Don't interfere. All right. Allow them to own both the credit as well as the debit of it. So if they have done well, the credit goes to them. If they have done badly, that also is their responsibility. Okay. Now, of course, you will continue to take interest. Of course, you will appreciate. Okay. And of course, please avoid comparisons with other people. All these you will do. You can also give your opinion when you're asked. Okay. Suppose a child writes an essay or writes a poem or does something, makes a drawing, and comes and asks you. Now, do you just unstintedly praise, or do you give a critical appraisal? That you have to, it will require tact and wisdom to know. Okay. Some children will do well with a critical appraisal. Some children may be very sensitive to any kind of criticism. So you have to gradually figure out how to handle each child and give your opinion if you're asked. But as far as possible, allow the child to learn the value of industry on their own and take responsibility for their own studies, particularly, and their own room, their own, bathing, whatever it is, everything. They have to learn to take responsibility. And you have to step back and back. Our job as parents is to let them go. Our job as parents is to train them and then step back. Okay. Now, don't live your life vicariously by the children's, achievements or whatever. Okay. That's not right. Their achievements should be theirs. Their credit goes to them. We step back and we watch and we are happy and we pray and we commit them to the Lord. That's what we do. Identity. How does the parent help the child develop their identity? The first thing you must remember again here is that this is a transition period. So you need to recognize that your child is an individual made in God's image. Okay. He or she is not you, nor are they an extension of you. Now, this is a lesson which it takes us a very long time to learn sometimes, particularly perhaps for mothers, because the child was actually a part of me at one point, right? But the child is not me. And the child has to be seen as an individual in their own right, which means that they have the right to choices, and they have the right to differ from us, and they have the right to explore. They have the right to disagree. So you need to encourage debate and discussion, and don't be shocked whatever the children say. Okay. Don't take things personally. Okay. Be prepared for some emotional storms as all this happens. You may need to set some limits, but the limits should be constantly revised and changed. Okay. You may say that, okay, you can wear this, but not this. All right. Or you can have this, but not this. Or let's debate on whether you need this or that. So you can keep on talking about it. Go on, keep your lines of communication open so that you can go on discussing what is suitable and what is okay and how much, they can push the boundaries. Okay. Introduce them to books and people who may have more answers. And I was interested in what Prabhu said, that there aren't many books about all this. I think there are a lot of books which you can introduce them to. They don't necessarily have to be Christian books. Okay. You can introduce them to other books as well, and then talk about it, critique it from a Christian point of view. You can watch a serial with them and ask them their opinion about it. Okay. And you figure out that, okay, this is what is okay and this is what is not okay. So I can remember doing that with our kids with various TV programs, which are completely secular programs. But because I kept asking them, and encouraging them to critique the show, they themselves learned the value of critical thinking, which is a very important thing to learn, where you're able to assess objectively something. All right. So introduce them to books and people and keep talking, keep discussing these things. Now you need to role model forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, because in this stage, believe me, there are going to be lots of, these sort of things. And again, don't compare with others. Don't expect your child's journey to be the same as someone else's. Okay? Your child may take a little detour. They may take some time to come back to the Lord. They may experiment with something which you're not comfortable with. All those things may happen, but you can't force the child down the road that you want them to go, right? So this is the thing. But we can trust the Lord that as we do this with the best of intentions and the humblest of hearts, that God will somehow honor us and keep this going well. All right. What about the school experience? Okay, what you talked about again. There are just a few things I want to say before closing. In the school experience, be positive and proactive. Just think ahead of what the child will experience in the next year and talk about that, whether it is peer pressure, whether it's relationships, whether it is perhaps bullying, whether it is increased pressure in studies. Talk ahead about what the child will face. Encourage friendships, but do not interfere if possible in the child's squabbles. Help them to learn from your example how to understand people's emotions and how to express their own in acceptable ways. Okay, so they need to be kind and forgiving and humble, but they also need to be assertive and serene. They don't have to crawl to somebody, without any reason. They don't have to tolerate bullying. They can always say, no, I don't want to do this. I am leaving, or something like that. Teach them how to set aside short periods of study. I'm saying short because these allow enough time for free activities, reading, play. Okay. Most of the time, we expect too much of studies from our children and just makes them hate study. It doesn't make any sense because ultimately you can only take the horse to the mouth of water. You can't make it drink. All right. So make the study times short and make it fun, and just allow plenty of time for discussion and talk, which is also what will happen. Okay. Last slide is about social media and gadgets. The statistics show that very early now, children, maybe about 60 to 70% of children in the age of maybe 12 or so will have phones, 12 to 14 years old. Okay. And also many of them, maybe up to 40%, they say, are on the phone all the time. Right. So what's the pros and what are the cons of these? Well, the pros are that there is a lot of education, there's a lot of awareness, there's a lot of information, right? There's some skills that the child develops definitely when they have access to gadgets. The cons, which people are worried about always, is that it's addictive, it takes away time from family, it might cause mental health problems. Okay, all these things are the fears that people have. The studies, though, show that if it is controlled reasonably, that mental health problems are not so much of a problem. Okay, you can limit them if you have certain limits in place, if you have certain boundaries in place. Okay, so we don't need to despair that the phone is going to be a huge problem. Okay, we can have a positive mindset about it. Keep talking with the child and figuring out how much can be used and how much cannot. And this should happen as soon as you give the child their phone. Okay, you have to set the rules in place. Now, one more study which is important is that parental overuse of phones and gadgets predicts children's overuse. All right. So remember that. Again, you are role modeling to your child. So be careful. And of course, there's a possibility of conflict. But rather than becoming the stern parent, our aim is always to help the child to learn self-regulation. Okay, so our discussions and our efforts should be to help the child to learn self-regulation so that they are free and able to form their own decision of how to do this. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to share. I've talked about self-image and where it comes from the externally and how the internal factors are more important. But as parents, we need to discourage the bad effects of the external factors. Okay? So whether it is the body, whether it's achievements, whether it's the world, whether it's us ourselves, which create bad, self-image in the children. We need to be careful of that. We have a huge role to play. Also in building these internal factors. Okay, and we build the internal factors of self-esteem by helping the child to develop a sense of industry and developing a sense of identity. All right. Industry by allowing the child to do more and more and stepping back and allowing the child to take responsibility. And identity by allowing the child to explore, ask questions, even, sort of push the boundaries. Okay. But when they do that, when we keep the communication lines open and keep talking to them about the Lord and demonstrate a Christian worldview and a faith-filled life, we believe that the child will achieve that kind of happy, identity formation, and they will be stable in their Christian identity. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to share, and the time is open now if you wanted to ask any questions or disagree.
Yeah, okay. Dr. Jamila, can you stop the screen share now? Yeah. So, friends, this is a time now for Q&A. Thank you, Dr.